See, I could feel it building. When I was living in Chicago before the Democratic Convention happened, I could feel for about 3 or 4 weeks before that, I could feel this building.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in the police force, I was a young cadet at the time, so I was studying to be a police officer, and at the same time, I owned a head shop where I had all these hippies living, making candles for me. So here I was in these
Did the police department know that?
Yeah, of course, sure. My family, my mom and dad were both cops at that time.
Oh, I see.
And so I come from a family of Irish Italians. They were all either
priests,
gym coaches, or cops. In Chicago, the Irish ran the...
So were you from Bridgeport?
No, Chicago.
But what part of town?
North Avenue and Pulaski. Smack dab in the middle of the city, about 4 blocks from Pioneer Savings and Loan. Where my family is still at. My whole family is still in that same block, same neighborhood. I'm the only black sheep who moved out here. But again, it was that radicalized me. Because I was bouncing between there and here for a while. From 1966, I first came here, liked what it was, went back, came out here, went back, came out here, went back, and then that 1968 convention, I had my first major nervous breakdown because of that event.
How old were you? You were born in 46?
Yeah, I must have been, what, in my 19s or 20s, something like that.
Okay. And you grew up in that neighborhood, what was it called?
I don't know what the neighborhood would be called, but North Avenue in Pulaski North Avenue was a dividing line between the Hispanics and the blacks who were on the south side of that street. And on the north side of the street you had Italian, Polish, and Irish mostly in that neighborhood.
And then you got into the cadets because, well, your parents were both...
Well, my parents were both, police officers at the time, uncles, relatives, nieces, nephews, Irish-Italian neighborhood, you were either going to grow up to be a cop, a priest, a social worker, or a garbage man.
How long had you been doing it?
I was just in the cadet training, so I hadn't done it long. Before then, I was in what was called the Reserve Traffic Police, which was a part of the state troopers program.
And did you have brothers and sisters that did the same thing? So
actually, my brothers and sisters grew up to do other things, except one of my brothers was a professional cat burglar. He was So we kept it in the family.
Remove the cover.
Oh, take that off? Yeah, sure.
More like...
Yeah,
so then did you get in conflict with your family, with your mom and dad, about what you thought about
No,
the stuff
not really.
that
Actually,
happened?
my parents were very, very, very liberal.
Were they upset about what the cops did at the convention?
Actually, they were. It was divided. As I was telling Paul the other day, the thing that I find normal about my family is my mother and father never agreed on anything in our entire life. My mother was a liberal, and she worked in the Steel Workers Union after she left the police. She worked at Continental Can for 30 years doing work establishing unions, as many women did. My father was just exactly the opposite. He was staunchly conservative and didn't agree. She was Lutheran, he was Catholic, on and on.
So he stayed in the police force?
No, he stayed for about 7 years, and then he left and wound up becoming a vacuum cleaner designer, and then later became a Chicago bus driver because he liked the uniform. He couldn't stay out of uniform, he said, very long, so he wound up becoming a bus driver so he'd have a uniform. Yeah.
But do you think that they were influenced to leave the police force by the
my mother definitely. Definitely. When they saw what happened to me, definitely.
They saw what happened to you, or they saw what happened in
They saw what happened to me, and they saw
how you felt and how you reacted.
Because I was in the house, and I was an example of what was actually going on. The rest of my brothers and sisters weren't that politically involved.
How long did these events last? Because it was a
week.
Quite a while. It started, like I said, for me, it started about 3 weeks before the Democratic Convention, because the police department was sending out memos to all the various captains in all the various districts saying that this is going to happen, get ready for it, get your shields, get your badges, hide your badges. They told hide your badges so people can't see who you are. All this little advice was being sent out, and to me, that advice was creating paranoia within the minds of the police officers. And I saw police officers do things 2 weeks before that convention that I never saw. Like
what did the memos say?
Well, the memos were saying, you know, that there's going to be this convention and a lot of people are going to be coming from California and stuff, and they're hippie types and we should watch out, and all these liberal left-wingers, you know, will probably be prone towards violence and so on and so forth. I can only paraphrase it in the way in which Mayor Daley himself said it. In the middle of the convention, he got up at the podium and he said, "The police are not here to instill disorder, but to preserve it." That was a slip of the tongue that was really very true. And he and the police force had created a sort of a paranoia within the minds of the police before the people even got there. Now, I lived in Chicago my whole life up to that, and to go into a park and hang out at a park until midnight was very typical. There's nothing unusual about that. But then suddenly, when the convention happens, the parks are closed at 10 o'clock at night, and they have police sweeping in to beat up and arrest anyone that's there. That was not typical of what happened there. So every maneuver that was being done by the police at that time was not atypical. It was not the way they did business before.
It was atypical.
Well, I say atypical. Yeah, it was atypical. It was not the way they did business. So all of a sudden, you've got police who are paranoid about the unknown. You got these kids coming from California who are extremely colorful, is the best way I could say, and are able to put on the most incredible show for other people. The first thing I saw when I went to Grant Park was they were going to roast a pig. And that was the first riot got started because they were threatening to roast a pig, and so they were going to start a bonfire to roast an open pit pig, and that, of course, got the police all fired up, and then they started busting heads. So, and all it was the people from California and from there who had come in there, they were just kind of putting on a show, and they were, to me, they were just a bunch of big-mouth people who were trying to overstate their purpose, and, you know, I was taught to sit and listen.
And the big issues at that time, for his benefit, what were they? Why were people even there?
Well, why were people there? There was a peace movement going on in America before that, and people didn't want the war. And it was obvious that the Republicans were pretty much in charge of the country. And even Eisenhower, didn't he warn us when he left office about the military-industrial complex? And here's what I saw. I saw two types of students protesting. There were those students who were auditing classes and whose parents sent them to college and they had a lot of money and nothing to do, and they were the extreme radicals. And there were the other kids who were working for a living trying to get through college, and they were the ones that were pretty quiet about it all. And what happened is, during that convention and during that period of time, these people who were uncommitted, who were fairly conservative and working, became radicalized because they saw what was going on and they thought that was unjust, and they very quickly went over to the other side. And so that's why you had this incredible fast motion of what I would say politicizing people almost overnight by discussing what was going on and then seeing the injustices that happened and seeing the way it happened. Also, you have to understand, Mayor Daley himself started out by fixing up, cleaning, and painting the area of the city where the Democratic Convention was going to be held, and that part of the city was dirty, filthy, scummy place. And then he practically puts up fences all over the place and turns it into almost an armed camp. The people in Chicago are wondering what's going on. So again, you have this fear of everybody doing business in a different way than we were used to, and the police force and all the powers to be getting geared up for what was going to be something like a storm coming. So they had that mindset.
You told me a couple days ago about going to the hotel near Grant Park.
Oh, that's when I had my nervous breakdown.
Can you recount what happened? What was the day? Was it? You remember what day it was and what time of day it was?
Again, it was right across from the Hilton Hotel. I don't remember. It was about 3 or 4 or 5 days into it. I remember that. What I remember is hearing on the news that morning that Sonny and Cher were in court and were testifying and saying some things, you know, some radical things about how the war was unjustified and stuff like that. And then that night, everybody was gathered around the statue out in front of the Hilton Hotel there. The park was right across the street from the Hilton. I had heard from my other cop friends that there were emergency services inside of the Hilton in case there was problems. And the police pretty much lined up, the ones that were on duty, arm to arm in front of the Hilton Hotel, all the way across and around the block with shields and bayonets ready. You know, I mean,
bayonets or batons?
I mean, they're batons. And what happened was I was sitting there in the park, dressed up in plain clothes with my other hippie friends, and I saw a rabbi and a Catholic priest talking about 20 feet from me. And when the police came, they flanked on both sides, coming from, what was that,
from the other side, you mean?
Well, the Hilton Hotel was here, and then from my right and from my left, they came in. So basically, we were surrounded on three sides by police, and they were boxing us in. And the two forces on the outside were coming in towards each other, squeezing people into the park there. And if you just wanted to get out of there and go home, you had to go through the police line. So that was going to cause problems. And what happened is I saw clubs beginning to swing, and these two priests, obviously dressed in priest drab, couldn't miss them, right? Here comes this wall of police swinging their batons, and they start beating the heads in of these two priests who were talking that didn't notice them come up behind them. And at that moment, something inside me went, there's something really wrong with this. I knew that the services for first aid were at the Hilton, so I started running towards the Hilton Hotel to get help for all the bashed heads I saw to the left of me. And as I ran, I saw friends of mine who I'd gone to high school and grammar school with, who were also police officers. We went, we were going to the academy together, and some of them were already police officers. The Parisi brothers, Joe Parisi and his brother, and my friend Butch Nowicki were already cops, and they were in line.
Uniform.
Yeah, they were in uniform, so with the helmets, which I'd never seen them geared up that way. So I did what anyone would do. I ran towards my friends. And as I started running towards them to see if I could get past them into the Hilton to get some services, I remember Butch Nowicki looking at me and not recognizing me. And I looked into his eyes, and I did not see a human being. I saw a mad, crazy, rabid animal staring back at me. And at that point, he pulls out his gun and aims it right at me. And my mind just went, bing, just like that. Snapped in a second. I couldn't believe that somebody I had known most of my life in that moment was so panicked that they didn't even recognize who I was and was threatening to kill me. And I knew that if I had gone 3 more steps, he would have shot. He would have fired. And it was almost surreal because I stopped dead in my tracks. I could literally feel my mind kind of step back inside of itself as I was going crazy. I could feel myself having a nervous breakdown. I was frozen with dread, and there was this surreal bloodletting going on all around me. People being bashed and screamed and running in all directions and screaming and yelling and shouting. And I'm just standing there, and time slowed down. And I'm watching this like it was a ballet. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. I slipped off sideways, went oblique, managed to break through the line where the police in front of the place and the police that were coming here. There was a little hole. I dodged through there like trying to make a touchdown. Got out of there, ran over to Wells and North Avenue where the business was that I had all these hippies. Went in there to tell people, you won't believe what's going on there. This place, everyone's going crazy. The police are mad dogs. The people are scrambling like crazy to get out of there, and I'm being bashed for trying to leave. And just at that moment, the police surround my shop because there's hippies in there, and they're threatened by it. So here I look out the window, and there is a line of police completely around the shop. And at this point, I just started drooling. I mean, I just literally had kind of like an epileptic seizure. And I don't even really remember what happened after that, because a day or so later, I was in the hospital.
Wow.
Undergoing medication. So that was my first major nervous breakdown.
Did you get busted then?
Pardon?
Did you find out later that you had been busted?
No, nobody in the place
cops
got
took
busted. The
you to
cops kept
hospital?
everybody inside the place to make sure that
they wouldn't join the stuff
joining
outside.
what's going on. It was their way of blockading the few known hippies that they knew that were hanging around in Piper's Alley. Because that's where all the Luminaire Theater was there, you know, and that's where all the radicals hung out, was basically on up and down Wells Street in Old Town.
Right.
And our shop was on North Avenue in Wells, right on the corner next door to Allen's Alley. And we were the only head shop in that area at the time.
What was it named and what did you sell?
You know, I can't even remember the name of it, except we called the place Paraphernalia. We sold candles, black lights, posters, bumper stickers, which we made ourselves, and then I invented a bunch of candles. One of the candles I invented was the Buddhist strobe candle. And we sold those, and they became pretty popular. So it was just a kind of a 60s head shop, which was mostly black light posters, bumper stickers, and candles.
Today, I think people would call it a head shop where you'd have pipes to smoke.
We had pipes. We didn't have bongs back then, but we had pipes made out of different kinds of plumbing, of course. We had a lot of, in those days, Nehru jackets and dashikis were very popular. So people would always wear some kind of a pendant, and we were making peace pendants out of stained glass and things like that. What would happen is if some kid came in from out of town who was basically a transient hippie, needed a place to stay, they could stay there in the commune for free, and we put them to work doing something. So whatever talent they had, we'd have them develop something.
The commune was in the building?
The commune was in the building. Behind the store was where we all lived.
Okay. It's on Wells.
It was on North Avenue.
It's on northwest of Wells.
Yeah, just half a block or so.
Yeah,
it's still attached to the same building as Allen's Alley. If you came out our door, went to the corner and around, you'd be in Allen's Alley. Best thick pizza in town.
It's all different now.
Yeah, and that's where the Luminaire was, which was one of the first radical theaters where we could go and see things like Andy Warhol films and, you know, and a lot of European films.
We were down the street from the Ale House.
Yeah.
And Oxford.
Yeah, all those, there was millions of little shops along Wells Street there that were, you know, there was a lot of clothing stores. There were stores that had machines that you could, you know, that would spin paper and let you do things.
So
there were places that sold tie-dye.
When he arrived, you said you hadn't seen him for 40 years. How did you two meet?
We didn't meet. I've just seen him around because I've done a lot of things with SDS and with the Weather Underground and some of the students back in that time. When I came back out here, I was still, after my nervous breakdown, and I got myself back together. The first thing I did was join Gay Liberation and Women's Liberation Front here in San Francisco and started working with them to do some things, which was kind of interesting because they were having a lot of trouble doing proactive politics. And having come from this thing in Chicago, you know, my point of view was just go out there and shout at people. You know, go out and get noticed. Get noticed.
Right. Attorney Cunningham, would you mind explicating a little bit, describing your experiences during the Democratic Convention? You had told me a month ago or so about living in that area. Or if you could explain it, just...
Well, we lived near Lincoln Park. We were in Lincoln Park those first couple of nights, and you know, with the cops, and then we were like, as neighborhood people, we were pissed off about the cops,
right,
know, being so rough in the park, in Lincoln Park.
And they don't know, of course, Chicago, Lincoln Park was where the...
Well, there's two different places where all this shit
Grant Park and Lincoln
one's
Park.
downtown and one's up on the north side.
North side, slightly, right.
And so we went to, a bunch of us, you know, like family people, went to the police chief, or the district police chief.
That's right.
To complain about the way the cops acted.
I remember.
And they're like, oh, no, you know, that's all a mistake, we're not doing it, you know, blah, blah. And they told us they'd come and walk through the park with them that night and make sure that they weren't out of line.
I remember.
It was Tuesday.
I remember the captain's name. His name was Captain DiGiacomo. Captain Giacomo. He was the head of that particular area, that police force
No,
that
no,
covered
I'm talking
Wall
about
Street, isn't it?
Brash. Clarence Brash.
Oh, okay.
He later went to jail
Yeah.
for taking money.
So did Butch Nowicki.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he wound up killing people.
Wow.
He was using black kids as a front for him to steal things, and then he would recover them and take them back, and occasionally people didn't pay attention to him, he would kill them. And they finally figured that out.
Wow.
He went to jail for murder.
Wow.
Big time case back then too.
Okay, so if you could describe the setting here, 1968, and what were you doing, and where were you living, address-wise?
I was living
Lincoln.
on the north side, and I was just starting out as a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, if you were in North Avenue in Wells and you went towards the lake, you would eventually get to Lincoln Park area.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it was like the upper part,
Right.
which I think they now call Newtown, don't they? That area. It's the
not
the upper old town is now called Newtown.
Right.
Were you there when Hugh Hefner got busted?
I don't remember.
Because I was in Lincoln Park at the time.
Busted? You mean during the convention?
Yeah, what happened is they were gassing the park to try to get everybody out of there, and Hugh Hefner showed up with a bunch of his girlfriends and was kind of la-laing around, sucking
Right.
on his pipe, because I was about a block away and recognized him, and the police, again, were flanking the thing and just busted his head in.
I don't remember.
And that became a big stink at the time because he was just standing around doing nothing, and he, had money and got lawyers, claiming that, he wasn't even considered loitering, but they said he was loitering at the time and he didn't move, so that's why he got busted.
Okay. Could you were giving me this description of it. You were out walking or something, or what did you expect?
No, I did. We went through the park with them, and then we were supposed to have another meeting with them, caused us to leave from downtown the next day, just when this stuff was starting to happen.
That's
on
right.
Michigan Avenue. And we went back up north, and I forget what the hell happened then.
It actually started around Lincoln Park. And it was in the late afternoon when they threatened to start a bonfire, and roast a pig. And and what happens is the police then started lining up. And then as people went towards the police to try to get past them, they noticed that they had all put their badges away and covered over their badges, because some people were running around with pencil and paper and were going to start writing down badge numbers, so the police officers were becoming violent. And what happened is they couldn't see them. So the police covered their shields. So they knew they were going to do what they did. Okay, that's the bottom line. They created that disorder on purpose.
Well, that's true. I mean, I think that that was a planned thing, and it was instigated from the top, and the mayor said
Right.
so.
Absolutely.
In the spring, nobody's going to come in Chicago and take over the streets of us.
Correct.
Can you
I
tell
mean,
about
the
that,
yippies
people?
really goaded them,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't. That's just that kind of disposition that he's talking about of the cops, where they just, they get robotized.
Yeah.
And but it's also like it's open season, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's stuff that happened in both parks on 2 and 3 nights probably.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty gross.
Yeah.
A lot of people got hurt.
It was pretty intense.
You became an attorney for some of the people who were suing? Is that who were arrested?
Or people who were arrested. People who were arrested I represented. And the fourth night, the last night, they were in front of the Hilton again, and they were going to march to the amphitheater, which is quite a ways away. And they told them they couldn't do it. And Dick Gregory got up and he said, well, we'll just march to my house.
That's right.
And we go,
Right.
he would take them by there. But what they really didn't want was all those white kids to march into the black
neighborhood, right. Exactly.
And so they stopped them.
Right.
At the National Guard stopped them at 18th and Michigan.
Right, they put up a barricade.
And told them to turn back, and they didn't want to turn back,
Yeah.
so they gassed them.
Right.
Earl Strayhorn, he later became a judge.
Mm.
And not even a bad one. But I had gone there. I went right to I didn't even get to that corner. I went to the court, and then just sat up there until they start bringing people in. I missed a lot of actual events because I was trying to act like a lawyer.
How many people did you get involved representing in these cases?
Man, there was hundreds.
Hundreds of people were.
People left town. Everything was over. Me and this other guy were sitting there. We had about 300-400 cases. I mean, they were bullshit cases. You know, they were. But a lot of people didn't want to give in to them, and they went after everybody. I tried a lot of cases. No juries. They're all infractions. You don't get a jury trial. I had a wonderful opportunity to cut teeth there. I did a lot of trials, cross-examined a lot of cops, caught a lot of hell from a lot of judges.
I have to say I was proud of the demonstrators, actually, because when the violence started, they were running around saying, "No violence, stop," and they were pulling back. The police were becoming more and more hysterical, and the violence was beginning to escalate, and they were beating and smashing anybody that was in their way for no reason at all.
There was nobody attacked any police during that time.
Oh.
There was no example of it.
And even during all that, the people were still backing off and trying to get away, basically. They were not fighting the police.
So it was so widespread there were hundreds of cases.
Oh, yeah. Thousands.
Oh, there were probably 600-700 people arrested in the 5 days. Not that many, really, compared. There was more arrested here in '84.
That's how many they could
That
haul
must
off.
have taken years to finish all the trials.
No,
There's no jury.
I would have.
You don't have a jury, so you just go.
Well, another thing, I would have checked the influx of the emergency rooms around there, because a lot of people got hurt that didn't get arrested. So if you add the injured and the lame to that, you're talking about thousands of people. If only 600 were arrested, that's because that, it was a chaos, and they were throwing them in the back of cars and taking them off.
So at this time, and I don't know anything about it, but I would think, because stuff like that, at least that now that I hear of, I don't think stuff like that happens now. I wonder if there are best practice rules,
there's been a lot of places where a lot of that shit happened. In Seattle about 8-9 years ago, that WTO thing up there, there was a lot.
Just recently,
and in Miami,
just because
the Republican convention in either 2004, I think.
For me, the difference between the California police and the Chicago police are a bunch of bullies, and they know it, and they act like pit bulls, and they're not ashamed of that. Here, it's all spit and polish, and they have the same temperament. They just pretend that they're following the rules, but deep down inside, they're just as paranoid and uptight in some cases.
Well, it's getting to be more, you can see it was happening as we speak in Pittsburgh. They've got people hemmed up a mile away from the place where the meeting is that they want to be protesting at, and when they're trying to get out of there, they beat them up.
What happened is the powers to be have learned how to handle some of this stuff.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But it still happens.
They refine the techniques.
They've refined their techniques.
Fences. They keep distance. That was started in Chicago. They weren't going to let us get anywhere near the amphitheater.
Nowhere near.
And I remember being in a negotiation beforehand with one of the deputy mayors, and it was like, would they get a permit till they could go to a place where they could see the front?
Right, see the building, right.
Yeah, right. And that was like a big dividing line. They couldn't agree. They just don't really. Right.
Most of the people in Grand Park were being pushed towards the McCormick Place, so they were being pushed in that direction. So they couldn't get uptown and away from the Hilton.
We talk about how it transitioned in Chicago to the Fred Hampton.
Yeah, in a quick few minutes.
Yeah.
It wasn't a long time, and it just kept going. If you're thinking of what happened, the reason that stuff happened in Chicago was because of the anti-war movement, and because of the election that was coming up, and because Lyndon Johnson had abdicated after the Tet offensive in Vietnam, and then King was assassinated, and then Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and then it was clear that there was a major wing of the Democratic Party that was supporting the war,
right.
and that Hubert Humphrey was their candidate, and Bobby Kennedy was going to be the anti-war candidate, and he was killed. So Eugene McCarthy was the anti-war candidate, and he was not, you know, the convention was clear the convention was going to roll over that candidacy and put Humphrey up against Nixon, which they did, and Humphrey lost.
But the protesters couldn't have stopped that from happening, could they?
Well, they wouldn't have admitted that. At the time, they thought they could influence it, and they thought they could carry the day for McCarthy, or some whole wing of them did. All of the wing were more radical than that, and just, you know, wanted to fuck up the whole process because the view of stopping the war was not seriously entertained by the powers that be. It was clear that the country, the government, whoever was going to be president was going to keep on with the war.
Keep on with the war.
And they'd just been shown that they were going to lose it because of the TEP.
And we were wondering why there was this overwhelming popularity, did not want it to happen, and everyone was wondering why we were so impotent. How could you have everybody in the country not want a war, and then the people in charge keep doing it?
Well,
so
40 years ago, 40 years
sooner or later,
passed,
something goes.
And 40 years later, we're still in the same exact.
Aren't we? Same
Exact
policies. And it happened before. I mean, that's how we got into the Korean offensive and various things like that. You know, where I lost my dad and a lot of stuff. It was the same stupid politics. And a lot of my relatives recognized that. But what was different is the younger kids coming out of college at that time were much more idealistic. And they wanted to fix it now. And if they couldn't fix it through the system, which they didn't believe in, then they wanted to break it and replace it with something that worked. Okay? So that was basically the feeling of the people at that time. Now, nobody was willing to engage in any kind of violent acts because everyone was really into Martin Luther King and Gandhi. And again, being idealistic, they wanted to do this with words and with the power of their persuasion. But that was the powers to be, they were bullies. They were bullies. I always say, if you're in a ring with a bear and the bear wants to eat you, there is no reason or amount of words or any argument you can give the bear that will stop him from eating you. So your job is protect yourself, get out of there, or attack the bear. You have one of two choices. Either you kill the bear before he kills you, or you get the hell out of there.
Or feed him.
Yeah. You are the food. You realize you are the food. You realize you are the food. The bear doesn't know the difference in what you're handing him in your hand.
Okay. Well, Dennis, I know you want to go. You have another appointment, whatever. And I appreciate it. I just wanted to have this connection. And actually, I did